Woman slapped a royal guard in public. What happened next left everyone speechless. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon in London, the kind of day that feels completely normal. Cloudy sky, cold breeze, tourists everywhere with their phones out. Nothing about that day felt like it was going to matter. But sometimes, the most ordinary days turn into stories that people talk about for years. The changing of the guard is one of those events that people travel thousands of miles to see. Every day, people line up outside Buckingham Palace, pressing against each other, raising their cameras, trying to get the perfect shot. And standing right in the middle of all that noise and movement are the royal guards, completely still, completely silent, dressed in their iconic red uniforms and tall black hats. They don't talk, they don't smile, they don't react. No matter what happens around them, they stand there like they were carved out of stone. Most people respect that. They take their photos, they wave, they go home. But some people look at a man standing that still and think it's an invitation to test him. That Tuesday, a woman in her mid-30s was visiting London with her friend. She had come from the United States, and this was her first time in the city. They had spent the morning doing all the usual tourist things: tea, double-decker bus, photos at the red phone box. By the afternoon, they found themselves outside Buckingham Palace, watching the guards like everyone else. And then her friend, in the way friends sometimes do, said something stupid. She dared her to slap the guard. It wasn't said seriously. It was the kind of dare that comes out of boredom and 2 glasses of wine at lunch. The kind of dare you're supposed to laugh at and walk away from. But something about the crowd around them, the attention, the phones already pointed at the guards, it made it feel like a performance waiting to happen. She walked up to the guard. He was young, maybe 22, 23, standing perfectly straight, eyes fixed somewhere far ahead, hands at his sides. He didn't look at her as she approached. He didn't blink. Around them, a few people in the crowd started filming, because whenever someone walks up to a royal guard with that kind of energy, you know something is about to happen. She stopped right in front of him. She said something. He said nothing. She waved her hand in front of his face. He didn't move. She laughed a little, looked back at her friend, soaking up the small ripple of attention she was already getting, and then she raised her hand and slapped him across the cheek. Not hard, not violent. More like the kind of thing you do to prove a point. A sharp, flat sound that rang out in the cold air. The crowd went quiet for a half second. A few gasps. A few more phones came out. He did not move. Not a flinch, not a twitch. His eyes didn't even shift. He just stood there, like it hadn't happened at all. Like she wasn't even there. The woman turned back to her friend with a laugh. She had done the dare. She had proven whatever it was she thought she was proving. Mission accomplished. She expected the crowd to move on, the moment to dissolve, and the day to continue. But then something happened that no one expected. The guard spoke. Not a shout, not a command. He didn't step forward or reach out or do anything aggressive. He just spoke, quietly, low enough that only the handful of people right at the front could hear him clearly. He said his mother had been watching the live stream. He said she watched every time he was posted there. She had set up a whole routine. She would pull up the live stream on her laptop, make herself a cup of tea, and watch him stand there for hours. She never got tired of it. It made her proud in a way she couldn't really explain. And he knew she was watching right now. He paused. Then he said she had passed away 3 weeks ago. The people who heard it went completely still. Someone at the back of the crowd asked what he said, and a few people quietly passed it along. The woman who had slapped him hadn't moved. She was still standing in front of him, and her face had changed completely. Whatever she had been feeling 10 seconds ago, the amusement, the light embarrassment of being watched, the casual victory of completing a stupid dare, all of it was gone. Her hand was still slightly raised from the slap. She started to cry, not a little bit. Not the kind of crying you can blink away. She stood there in front of hundreds of strangers, and cried the kind of tears that have nothing to do with embarrassment, and everything to do with the gut punch of accidentally walking into someone else's grief. Her friend, who had been laughing 10 seconds earlier, had stopped completely. The guard didn't look at her. His eyes were still fixed ahead, but there was something in the way he was standing, not cold, not angry, just heavy, that told you exactly what kind of person he was. Someone who had been doing his job every single day since his mother died, standing outside a palace while tourists pointed cameras at him, carrying something enormous and invisible, while the world treated him like furniture. The video went everywhere that night. Millions of people watched the clip. It showed the slap. It showed the woman standing frozen. It showed her crying. Then it cut off. No audio. Just the image of a woman who had walked up to do something thoughtless, and then didn't move for a very long time afterward. The internet decided what it meant before the video was even finished loading. She was embarrassed. She got called out. She was owned. Comment after comment after comment, all running the same story. Tourist messes with royal guard, guard wins, end of story. Except that wasn't the story. Nobody watching that clip knew what he had said. They just saw the result of it. And when you don't know what someone said, you fill in the blanks with whatever story already makes sense to you. 3 days later, a journalist tracked down the guard. He was off duty, sitting in a small coffee shop in South London, out of uniform. Just a young man in a gray jacket drinking from a paper cup. He wasn't hard to find. Someone had identified him from the video, the way people always do now. The journalist asked him what he had said to her. He looked at his coffee for a long moment. Then he looked up. He said he hadn't planned to say anything. Guards aren't supposed to speak unless they're issuing a formal warning to keep a distance. But when her hand connected with his face, something just came out of him. He wasn't trying to shame her or teach her a lesson. He wasn't performing for the crowd. He said the only thing he could think about in that moment was his mother. She used to watch every single time he was posted. She had done it for 2 years, ever since he was assigned to the palace. She would call him afterward and tell him she had seen him, that he had looked strong and proud, that his grandfather would have been honored. And 3 weeks before that Tuesday, she had gone into hospital for what was supposed to be a routine procedure and never come back out. He had been back at work 6 days after the funeral. Not because anyone made him go back, because standing there was the only thing that felt like it still made sense. It was the one place where he knew exactly what he was supposed to do and how he was supposed to do it. Everything else felt like standing in a room where all the walls had been moved 2 feet in every direction. Familiar, but completely wrong. But the post felt the same. The uniform felt the same, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he still half believed she was watching. The journalist published the piece 2 days later. It was not a dramatic article. There were no dramatic quotes, just the facts, told quietly. It got shared about 40 million times. The woman, who had never spoken publicly about any of it, had not posted anything, had not tried to explain herself, read the article sitting in her car in a parking garage in Atlanta. She had landed back home the day before. She read the whole thing without moving. Then she sat in that parking garage for 40 minutes staring at the steering wheel. She didn't go up to her apartment that night. What she did instead, no one knew about for a while. She didn't post it. She didn't make a video. She didn't reach out to the journalist or the regiment, or anyone connected to the story. She just did it, quietly, on her own. She flew back to London 2 weeks later. She went to the palace. She asked to speak to someone, anyone, connected to the regiment. It took a few tries and a few awkward conversations before someone agreed to pass something along. What she had brought was a letter, 3 pages, handwritten. Not an apology to the guard, exactly. Or not only that, it was written to his mother. She had written to a woman she had never met, who was no longer alive, to say that she was sorry for the day she made her son's grief public without knowing it, that she had walked up to him thinking he was a statue and not a person, and that was the real problem. Not the slap, but the fact that she hadn't considered for even a second that there was an entire human life behind the uniform. That she hoped wherever his mother was, she knew her son had handled the worst kind of day with more dignity than most people manage on their best ones. She asked someone to make sure the letter reached him. It did. He read it once, sitting on the edge of his bed in his flat. Then he folded it carefully and put it in the box he kept on his shelf. The box he hadn't been able to open since his mother died. The one with her watch and her letters and the small things that had been on her bedside table. He put it in there with her things. That detail, just that one detail, when it came out months later in a longer profile of the guard, broke something open in people, in a way that none of the earlier coverage had. It wasn't the slap. It wasn't the video. It wasn't even the letter. It was the image of a young man in a small flat, deciding that a letter from a stranger who had once done a thoughtless thing to him belonged alongside his mother's watch. There is no clean ending to this story. The guard still goes to work. He still stands outside the palace in the cold, Still, silent, eyes fixed ahead, tourists still film him. Some of them probably dare each other to do things they shouldn't. He carries what he carries and doesn't show it, because that is the job, and also because that is just who he is. The woman went home and got on with her life. She never spoke publicly about any of it. If she thinks about that Tuesday afternoon in London, and she probably does, no one outside of her own head knows what she makes of it. But somewhere in a flat in South London, in a box that once sat by his mother's bedside, there is a letter that traveled thousands of miles to find its way into a place where it was never meant to go. Written by someone who came to understand, too late, but not too late, that the person she had treated like a prop was someone's whole world. And that is the part of the story that the video never showed.